This is the Millennials in Multifamily podcast, brought to you by Kronos Investment Partners. We interview industry experts to unlock key information that will help young professionals break into the multifamily world in order to create long-term and short-term wealth. If you enjoyed the show, please head over to iTunes and leave a rating and written review so we can reach more listeners.
Sandhya Seshadri, thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of the Millennials in Multifamily podcast. Would you mind giving us and our listeners just a little bit about your background and how you transitioned into being a full-time multifamily real estate investor?
Sure, John. Thank you so much for having me here on your podcast. I really appreciate it. My background is in electrical engineering. I have a bachelor's and master's in EE, and then I started working for a technical firm in a technical job. And I also got my MBA part-time through them because they were kind enough to pay for it. So I got a lot of education through that. And as I sat through so many engineering meetings, I realized that the people with a business background were making all the decisions. So that's what led me to my MBA. And after about over a decade of doing that, and I had children, I realized that I needed more time with my family. So I transitioned full-time into the stock market. I was already a stock market investor, but I was making enough money to where financially I could easily transition and make my engineering income, if not exceed it, and not have to worry about a corporate schedule to keep, because I had a lot of international travel. And believe me, that was fantastic. Loved traveling all over the world. But at some point it was like, I really need to be the boss of my own time, not just have financial freedom. So then the stock market was wonderful. It treated me really well. I think it treated a lot of us well. So then I had the wealth built through that for the next, several years. And at that point, it was like I was paying too much in taxes. And every wealthy person I'd ever met had something to do with real estate. And I wanted to create some kind of a passive income that would cash flow, whether I was sitting on the beach or actually working hard on something. And that led me to multifamily. So I stayed away from single family only because I didn't want to self-manage a property myself or get called in the middle of my Thanksgiving dinner that there was a leak in the toilet that I had to fix and things like that. So I always assumed that with single family, buying a few rental properties, I would have to self-manage it. And that wasn't appealing to me. So the stock market was much easier, low maintenance. I could get as involved or not involved as I wanted. But when a friend told me about multifamily and passive income and passive cash flow, that made a lot of sense. So I invested in a deal, and then I attended a weekend event that was all about multifamily. I'm based in Dallas. I've been here for about 30 years. So I wanted a group, a mentoring program or group that was focused in Dallas, that had a lot of deals in Dallas, well respected in the Dallas area. So I joined a formal mentoring program. And from there, it was easy. It was just, everywhere you go, there's like 500 people in a meeting room, all interested in multifamily. It was just perfect. You could talk to them about investments, asset management, underwriting, anything, it was perfect. It was like a kid in a candy store, so to speak. So it's, I think of mentoring programs, which are a little bit expensive, as membership to a country club. So you get exactly your target market right there. You speak the same language. It's really, that's what it is. It's the network. And sometimes, one or two pieces of advice from someone can save you so much money, but it can, more than that, save you a lot of sleepless nights making mistakes, in your assets. So it was well worth it. So after investing a few deals passively and, having a whole year of meeting all these people, it was very easy to find people I wanted to partner with. And that's what led to my first syndication and my second one. And now I'm full-time in it and I love it.
Your journey into multifamily makes me think of a kid in a candy store. That sounds that sounds awesome. Sounds so much fun.
It really is.
So you alluded to the fact that you skipped single family just because you didn't want to be dealing with tenants, termites, and toilets over Thanksgiving. Yeah. Did you have any mental roadblocks or limiting beliefs as you just went straight into multifamily? Did you ever have a moment where you're just like, there's no way I could buy a 100+ unit apartment complex as my first deal?
Yeah, I did have that limiting belief until I went into this mentoring program, watched the videos, and saw many engineers like me, which was the best part. It's like, okay, geeks like me can also do good business. We also understand business. We also got the education now. We can do this too. And it was very relatable. So ordinary, just good old middle class geeks like me were able to do this. So then I got the confidence. But at the same time, when you take other people's money, you want to be really careful about managing that asset and making it true, because your reputation, you're only as good as your reputation. So I didn't want to make a lot of mistakes in my first deal, which is why I wanted to partner with people who had the experience that I did not have. So I was always having someone else doing the checks and balances, so to speak, on my first deal, instead of me going solo.
So believe it or not, a lot of the young people we've interviewed actually do sign up for the mentoring programs, and it may be a little bit more expensive for them than it was for you at the time with your high flying job and killing it in the stock market. Do you have any advice to anyone who's looking for a mentoring group to make sure that they join the right one and don't just essentially throw money down the drain?
Yes. I think it's very important to do your homework on everything, including mentoring groups. So what are you after? So the first thing for me is that they need to be established in the market that I want to be involved in, so that, I can talk to 500 people literally today about the Dallas market, about the submarkets, about the little streets, etc. Because I joined a mentoring group that specializes and focuses a lot here. This is where they're based. So half the people live here. They really know their market. That's very important. The second thing is, what are your goals and how hard are you willing to work for it, right? I want to syndicate a 100+ unit deal within the next 12 months. Let's say that's your goal, right? What does it take to buy a 100+ unit deal? In Dallas, a lot of deals are going for about $100K per door. So right there, you're at like 10 million kind of pricing. So for a $10 million deal in today's post-COVID kind of middle of COVID kind of market, you have to be able to raise at least about $3.5 million for it, only because of the requirements, lender requirements and stuff, and CapEx budget, etc. So how much money can you raise on your own, right? That's one big piece of it. The money that you can raise plus who you partner with is going to help you decide the size of the deal. That means how big a property can I buy, right? So you always want to have extra expenses, like 6 months of living expenses saved before you get into this. So that's a big piece of it. When you choose a mentoring program and your goal is, let's say, to syndicate a 100+ unit deal, exactly how much work do you have to do and how much is the mentoring program going to do for you? Like, let's say I wanted to create a website. I go throw money at some service. They literally give me back a website, right? Well, this is not like that. Once you join a mentoring program, what you really get is the textbooks. It's up to you to study it, meaning it's videos. Okay, it's not textbook, but it's the textbook kind of knowledge is what you get. Then you have to take that knowledge, quickly absorb it, and become an expert at least one thing. Like John's really good at underwriting deals. That's a talent for him. And his background in finance helps him with that as well. So you got to kind of find how you can add value, right? And find a sponsor with whom you can co-sponsor at least your first deal instead of going solo. So no matter how much a mentoring program teaches you, the practical knowledge is very different. It's like you went to college, you went to high school, and you learned a lot of things from textbooks and classes. But this is the real world now. It's like you're in your first real job kind of scenario. So if you don't want to make a lot of mistakes, you need partners who can kind of watch over you and double check your numbers, etc. So does the mentoring program really give you that? No, it's up to you once you join the program to do all of that networking, to do your groundwork and convince someone with the experience. Why should they give you their time of day, right? So to speak. So a lot of it is up to you in most of these mentoring programs. So you need to understand that. And you also need to say, okay, what if I was just willing to roll up my sleeves? Because I'm thinking of your audience being much younger folks without a lot of wealth already built and trying to get into the space. Well, roll up your sleeves, be ready to do whatever is needed for that sponsor, which is hard work. Think of getting paid like an intern, right? And so convince someone that you're really focused and hardworking, and you'll do a lot of things for them that'll save them time. And don't worry about the compensation piece of it, right? You can't really go in there and ask for an equal share of the whole sponsor's pie if you're a newbie without the asset management experience, without bringing a lot of capital in, and just kind of figuring out the ropes, right? So you'll have to be like their intern, like you are if you've ever done an internship in a company, you know how it goes. You get to be the one who removes the staples or something in a stack of papers, that kind of thing. So, you can go alongside with them as they tour properties. You can see the things that they look for, and you learn. This is your practical training. So that would be the way that I would go about it. If I didn't have capital and I don't have the experience, then you pick one or two people who you really like and follow based on podcasts, based on other factors like market, etc. And then you say, I really want to learn from these people. Now, there are mentoring programs out there to do this for you, which is to teach you everything. And they range anywhere in price from $6,000 to $30,000. So I know of several. And if someone really wants to know more about individual programs that I've heard about and experienced myself, I'm certainly happy to give them a little bit of my time and tell them my 2 cents offline. But every one of them has their own benefits, but it depends on how much you put into it. So think of it as like you are in a athletic, some kind of sports, team sports, right? How do you get selected for your high school football team or whatever, right? It depends on how hard you worked and how much practice you did. That's when you make the team. And even when you're in the team, are you on the bench or actually on the field? That totally depends on how much you have put into it. So the right person with the right attitude and the amount of hard work can convince a very experienced team member to take them on. So it is possible.
That was amazing.
Yeah, you really get our audience. That was great.
No, that was perfect. So if you did have capital, you said in your first couple of deals you were passive. Would you say that was a great way for you to learn kind of the ropes of the business? Were you pretty involved, or was it kind of like, hey, send me the check here?
I was a very active passive investor because my goal through passive investing was to learn the business, but without taking on all the risks myself. So a sponsor has a lot of sleepless nights over a lot of their financials and numbers. And I don't, because I just get to question them. I just get to read those monthly reports. And I made sure I invested passively also in deals that were in my target market, which is Dallas. The second thing was, remember, I had worked in the corporate world for a while. So I had all that retirement money that I was able to roll over into an EQRP, which is by Damien Lupo, by the way, with which I was able to invest in these deals passively. So that's a type of solo 401k, just in case you're wondering, what the heck am I talking about? Well, in your typical normal 401ks, you can't just take that money and invest it in real estate. They only allow you a certain set of funds to invest it in. So instead, you have to roll it over into another qualified retirement plan before you can invest it in real estate. And some people do it with a self-directed IRA, but I chose to do it with an EQRP, which is a type of solo 401k, just to clarify. And when you have retirement money, you cannot invest that in your own deals where you are one of the general partners. So it was a perfect use of that money to learn the business and invest passively while getting as much knowledge and learning I can out of it, and building relationships with those sponsors. So even if this sponsor is not my future partner with whom I would co-sponsor, the fact that I gave them at least $50,000 of my money makes me a little bit closer to ask them questions. So if I run into a problem in my own deal, I have at least a dozen people I can ask who will give me their time of day, who will instantly text me saying, don't do that or just do that. So as I've reviewed a lot of deals over the last 6 months during COVID, trying to find one deal that meets my strict financial underwriting criteria, I have several different people I can use as a sounding board and say, okay, this is what I'm thinking. What do you say? They're like, you're right on the money. Don't do it. It's better not to have a deal at all than to invest in the wrong deal. So I get a lot of people in the business with a lot of experience that I can tap on because I have invested my money with them passively. So there's a lot of benefits of passive investing if you've got the capital saved from previous W-2 jobs, et cetera.
So you had alluded to in your first deal, just kind of picking a role and then using that as a way to leverage your way in and add value. So on your first deal or your first few, what was that role for you? What did you specialize in?
Boots on the ground. So I'm in Dallas, and so I can go on site anytime you want. So my partners call me and say, hey, there's a vendor coming tomorrow. Are you available to meet them on site? Sure, I'm there. So we had the water conservation guys come over, and I was available to meet with them. And it gave me a great opportunity to walk every unit on the property. So I could tell, oh, who are the good tenants keeping the property nicely? Who are the bad ones that I don't really want? So I went in with a clipboard with all my unit numbers written down, and I had a checklist of, just an easy way to check neat, tidy, untidy, tenant I want to keep, et cetera, et cetera. In addition to the main reason we went in there, which is, okay, showers, or, how many fixtures they had. Like, do we have to replace 2 faucets? How many, shower heads, et cetera. So it was a very valuable experience to be there. I was there for due diligence. I was there when vendors came, et cetera. That was the biggest value. But I also had capital to bring in, and I also helped raise some of the capital, although not as much as my partners. And I also underwrote the deal. This was a deal that came through my first deal, that is. It was listed by a popular brokerage in this area. We all underwrote the deal. We all questioned each other's, underwriting, saying, how can you do that? How did you manage to get the numbers to work with that? And that's aggressive, or whatever other. Is your property tax number right? That's one of the biggest things you always look for is, have you estimated property taxes accurately for that county? Because in Texas, they really go after you for that. So I did a little of everything, but my primary role to add value to partners, because both my partners were out of state. So they would have to fly in every time to see the property. And instead I could just be their eyes and ears and, go in there with FaceTime or take a video and just show them, look, they said the sign would be up, or this, landscape would be trimmed and maintained, and it's not. So I would make surprise visits to the property. Et cetera. And of course, I had financial knowledge. So, my confidence grew with each time that we would have weekly calls, and I gained this experience. So my voice was getting more and more stronger and confident as we went on. So great experience.
You just mentioned a bunch of different roles: underwriting, being the boots on the ground, capital raising. I think that those are the 3 you mentioned. Are there any other roles that, if you're looking to get into a deal, you could specialize and leverage your way in, that you can think of? Are those the main ones?
Those are the main ones. So there's 3 prongs to investing in a deal. One, the hardest one is finding the deal, having that broker relationship, finding a deal that actually underwrites to your strict criteria. And then the next part, once you find that deal, and your broker, you have a strong enough relationship, you can convince them that you will close this deal, and your offering price is pretty close to the highest price, then that relationship kind of helps you get the deal, right? So that's a big piece of it, is to find the deal. The second part is raising capital for that deal. So that's the second prong, so to speak, of multifamily investing, is raising enough capital and doing everything till you close the deal. And then the third part, the hardest part, the longest part, is the asset management. Because now it's great. You've designed this beautiful car. It looks amazing. Can it drive? And how long can it last? So this is where rubber meets the road. So you really have to do your asset management thoroughly and closely, because your reputation will follow you. So this is a small world in multifamily. If you don't manage your asset correctly and you don't come true on your numbers, as a lot of people are now finding out through COVID, then your passive investors aren't coming back. So that's the third piece. So if you've done a lot of single family and smaller multifamily, you can add value in asset management. If you have a construction background, you could add value in asset management. But if you're good with your numbers, you have a financial background, underwriting may be a great place to add value. And even if you're not located where all the deals are, like John, you're out in Maryland somewhere, right? And so let's say you're interested in the Dallas market. You can still have establish a relationship with all the major brokers in the Dallas area. And you can leverage the fact that you've already got one deal under your belt, and you're motivated, you're free to travel anywhere. You don't have any strings attached, like half a dozen kids in the house, et cetera, that hold you back. You can just hop on a plane, hop in your car, be there on site, et cetera, right? So you got a lot more flexibility. So you can leverage all of that, and you've got a team. And, if you find the right deal, you've got a team to help raise the capital. You don't have to think of it as solo. So those are all things. I would definitely leverage the resume of other people you've done deals with, or who are willing to co-sponsor with you. Add their name, so that you take that with you when you go to the broker. So especially the last 6 months of COVID, when everyone's been living on Zoom, it's easy for you to have these kind of calls with brokers. You don't actually have to meet them physically, personally, and have coffee with them for them to know that. So that can be a skill, especially, I hate to say this, but people young and full of energy, whether it's boys or girls, both. That's a very favorable thing, because I see a lot more brokers on the, under 30, under 40 kind of category, more than the middle-aged people, shall we say. So that's definitely a place where you can connect more easily and establish relationships. Ultimately, it's a matter of making the broker feel confident that you can close a deal. So that's where you can add value. There's underwriting. And then, of course, capital raise. That'll come as you have a reputation and you've come through on previous deals. That'll come. And then asset management.
So it seems like the acquisition or finding the deal is like kind of where you don't need a lot of experience. You can kind of put in a lot of that sweat equity. How do you see people finding deals in this new environment with COVID and everything? How's it been for you?
It's been harder and harder for me to find a deal that meets a conservative underwriting criteria. I would love to believe the numbers in the broker's OM, but I have to be a little skeptical about it, right? Because today, let's say today is September 2020. If you're looking at a deal and you're looking at their T12, half of it is COVID T12, half of it is not. So if you look at an overall number, look for that trend to see how that property is doing. Usually before they list a property, the last 2 or 3 months, they really try to fill it, whether it's with, the wrong type of tenants, or they keep their expenses down, or they try to put more of it as a CapEx so it doesn't affect their NOI. So be really watchful for that, and stick to your conservative underwriting principles. So if there's an in-place cap rate, like today in Dallas, it's 5 cap, make sure your exit cap is not the same 5 cap, right? Because you can't just assume it's going to be a great market in a few years when you're ready to sell your property. Property taxes, always assume up to 100% depending on the county. And that's where the local knowledge helps. But look up the property tax rate of that county. Make sure your calculations are based on your purchase price. For 100%, especially if it's county like Tarrant County, Denton County in Texas. Yes, you will hire a property tax protesting company to do that, to protest your taxes, and you will get some savings, but don't bet on it. Think of it more as bonus or gravy. Don't require it for the deal to work well. Another underwriting criteria we look for is make sure the deal, you can make all your payments, mortgages, etc., the deal and the property as is, without having to do a lot of heavy lifting to turn it around. Because if you don't upgrade the property, you may not get the rent bumps that they have promised you in the OM until you make it all, stainless steel and granite countertops and new light fixtures, a fresh coat of paint, nice new floors, etc. Well, all of that could add up depending on the size of the, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom units. You're talking $6K easily, right? $5-6K, new appliances and all that. So don't have to, that's a lot of CapEx to spend up front in the hope that you'll get the rent bump. But let's say you didn't do the CapEx and you don't get the rent bump. Is the property going to float with the new price you are paying for it? Because everything worked with the price or the taxes, everything based on the old price of the previous owner. But now you're going to be paying $2-3 million more for this property. Will it work with you doing nothing to it? And another thing, do not assume any rent bump for at least the next 12 months, possibly 18 to 24 months. Be very careful with that. When you do comps, don't just call up apartments.com or looking it up online, etc. Actually visit the properties, because a comp is not a comp until you know just how fancy the place next door is compared to yours, right? So somehow, if you can be local and you can actually visit the comps, that makes a big difference.
Are you struggling to understand how to underwrite multifamily properties? Hi, I'm John Stober, and I completely understand your problem. I thought underwriting would come naturally to me due to my background in finance and accounting, but I quickly found out that there aren't a lot of resources that cover this subject. I had no idea whether what I was doing was right, wrong, or just original. I don't want you to have to pick up little nuggets here and there like I did. So I wrote an ebook called How to Analyze Big Apartment Buildings and Make Them Feel Small that puts together all the pieces of the puzzle. We're also giving away a deal analyzer with the ebook, and they're both completely free. Don't wait as long as I did to start chasing financial freedom. Go to bit.ly/underwriting ebook and get your free copy today.
So, Sandhya, when you say the property needs to work without making any upgrades, do you mean that you just need to be able to make all the payments and pay all the bills, or do you actually mean that you need to meet like certain cash on cash, IRR, and other investor metrics?
All of that, right? What if you did nothing to the property? What if you just bought the property today? You didn't want to spend or didn't have the capex to spend, and therefore you're not getting the rent bumps. Can the property still make its payments and meet your passive investor cash on cash and other metrics? That's
right.
The question.
So the reason I ask though is because in most syndication models, or at least with value add plays, aren't the returns, I mean, to meet them, isn't it pretty much a requirement that the rents are bumped, which is usually done by making upgrades?
Yes, on a deep value add type of deal, that's what you do. You might even not meet the full occupancy requirements for agency debt. You might be taking other kind of loans, etc. I understand that. I'm just saying that a deep value add deal of that nature, where you have to spend a lot of money before you can get the rent bumps, is a bit more risky right now in terms of cash flow in your first 12 to 24 months. If your investors and you as a group don't care about the cash flow in the immediate 12 to 24 months, you'll still be okay, because in the end, in 5 years, your property will appreciate in value. So in the back end, you'll get a lot more money, no doubt. But today, people are having problems collecting rent from their tenants, just the basic rent without even the extra $100, $150, whatever bumps, right? So
Right.
if people are already having collection issues, bad debt, evictions, and a lot of businesses, as you probably can guess, are shutting down, forced to shut down because of what's happened with COVID the last 6 months. To believe that it's not going to affect anyone and it's not going to be seen with the rest of us, I think is a bit unrealistic. Secondly, November elections, most likely we think a certain candidate might win, but it might go the other way, and that could influence a lot of these kind of rental laws and things like that. So it's better to be a little bit cautious than be in a rush to invest, right? Why don't you wait and see how it plays out, or be conservative enough that your property's numbers will work regardless of who ends up winning this election.
So
right?
you had previously told me about something like a COVID clause that you put in your offers and your contracts that acts as a pretty awesome hedge in case NOI goes down. I hope you remember what I'm talking about.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, could you share that with us and our listeners? What exactly is that clause? Because it's pretty powerful, especially right now.
So definitely you want to get with a good legal team who's very familiar with syndications to help you with this wording. But in a nutshell, what it means is that, let's say you're offering $10 million for a property, and because of COVID, you think your monthly rent collections are going to dip by a certain amount. Let's say it's going to dip by $30K or so for the next 6 months. So then you take that $180K and you put that into like an escrow kind of account, and you don't pay the seller the full $10 million. And so this $180K gets released after that 6 months is up, when, okay, it's met its numbers, as an example.
And and sellers aren't balking at this right now? Because, I mean, we've seen a lot of properties coming to market, and it doesn't seem like anyone is willing to budge on price or terms. It's, a seller, it's still like a pre-COVID environment.
Yeah, sellers are still acting like this is a seller's market. Now there's no problem and everything is perfect. And this is, I'm talking again, when we had this conversation, this was a few months ago when COVID was very much rampant and a lot of deal flow had stopped or slowed down significantly. Now it's back. It's like flowing like this, river downstream kind of speed. I'm getting so many deals a week now. So I'm being cautious. A lot of them are assuming very optimistic numbers like it was pre-COVID and COVID never happened. So, it depends on how badly you want to get a deal and then suffer the next fight. It's sort of like marriage, marry in haste and then repent it at leisure for the rest of your life. You might be really, really keen on getting a deal under your belt and then go in for one of these deals, overpaying a little bit. But when you start asset managing it and you run into all these problems, you have no margin once you've paid up all the margin and overpaying for the deal up front. So when a disaster strikes, like at least in Dallas, I can tell you, we get hit by tornadoes, we get, lightning strikes, this and that. We get a lot of roof damage. So even if my roof is damaged and I have insurance for it, my down payment is going to be about $50,000 on my insurance policy. That's quite a hit, right? So things like that, you don't have any margin left when you overpay for these deals. And so it's true, sellers are acting like it's a seller's market and wanting top dollar. And you can just stand back and be patient and say, it's okay. The right deal will arrive. It's better to be, in the right deal than suffer through the wrong deal just to say, I have a deal. You'll have sleepless nights and your passives won't come back to you. So remember that. Every time you feel impatient, walk away from that computer, throw away that phone, go take a hike, go run, come back an hour later, calmly think about it, have a nice meal. Use some friends as your sounding boards who are experienced real estate investors. Definitely call on your mentors to look at the financial underwriting and they'll tell you, okay, that's too aggressive. You have no margins. And so listen to them. But yes, I am seeing that sellers don't want to accept terms like that. And so you may lose a deal. So your broker, again, is your best friend. Your broker can tell you up front whether they would even consider something like that or not. So all you're doing is you're putting that money in an escrow. So compared to a $10 million deal, $180,000, $200,000 is not such a big drop in the bucket, in my opinion. But why should someone take that chance as a seller if someone else is able to buy that property without those terms? So there hasn't been a lot of deal flow the last several months. So there's people with 1031 exchanges and a lot of money that's waiting to be placed on a deal for tax benefits, et cetera. So you will see people overpaying for deals in the next 30 to 60 days, no doubt.
So could you talk about, because you've bought properties before COVID and obviously you're managing them now. Could you talk about the differences in asset management pre-COVID versus post-COVID?
So I don't know if I would do anything significantly different or I've been doing anything significantly different now versus a year ago, because we acquired our assets last year. And when you acquire an asset, you go about executing the business plan, which is spending money on your CapEx projects to enhance the property so you can get your rent bumps. And I don't think we would have necessarily changed that. And we were pretty careful. We made sure we got multiple bids on every job. And it all came true, surprisingly. So we did LED upgrades. We did water conservation because we had all bill paid on one side. And another one, we did moving the office. So our leasing office was actually occupied in a 2-story, 2-bedroom, 1.5 bath unit, which is a townhouse style of unit. So it's the most expensive unit we had out there. And that's a leasing office. And then the upstairs was used for storage and stuff. I'm like, okay, this is the first thing that's got to go. So we made room in our laundry center and built a really hard reinforced wall so somebody couldn't punch through it, and then built an office there. So I think there's no doubt we'd have done that project regardless. So we had the CapEx budget to execute all of these, so I know we would have done them regardless. Even if this happened today instead of a year ago, I think we would have executed all of those projects, which we did. The only thing I'm scrutinizing a little more closely is my turns. Unit turns, how quick are they happening? How many days have my properties not been getting rent? It's like when a flight takes off, those empty seats are gone forever. So we're paying attention to the number of days that we haven't collected money. So basically your economic vacancy numbers, we're paying more close attention to that to say, what can we do to improve this? Why did we not collect rent for those number of days? Is it because we couldn't lease our unit fast enough? Or is it because we couldn't turn them fast enough, right? So we're trying to do that analysis now, and we're providing an incentive. Earlier during COVID, so from March to August is sort of your peak leasing season, right? Spring through the end of summer before people settle down for the fall semester, if you will. So we offered an incentive for our leasing manager to be, if she's able to lease everything at pro forma, then she got a certain reward for every unit. Once the tenant moves in and pays the rent for the first month, et cetera, then she gets like a $50, $100 kind of bonus, depending on the number of units. So same thing we're planning to do with a combination of our leasing manager and maintenance person to incentivize them to say, okay, we lost X number of days of collections this year because of whether it's not leasing fast enough or not turning fast enough. Let's hit these targets now every month, and you get an incentive by quarter if you hit these numbers. So that's something we're doing now. But I also think it's because our property is stabilized. We've gotten to know our property management team very well. We know their strengths and we know what our priorities are now to take it to the next level. But both properties, if we had to sell them now, strictly based on just NOI and the cap rates being just as great now in Dallas as last year, which is shocking, the properties will both be ahead. We're well over at least $1 million on each property. So somehow it's done great. So we're very blessed to have really strong property management teams in both properties to be executing so well.
Yeah, so I was going to ask, on all your properties, they're stabilized now, right?
Yes.
So on these new turns, what are you guys doing? Are you guys just doing a quick turn, or is there any new replacements you're trying to push the rents even higher?
But we still have some units which have had the same tenants for several years. We've been slowly bumping up the rents, but we haven't had a chance to have the units vacant to fully upgrade them, to bring them up to today's standards. So some of them are still somewhat classic in look. They don't quite have all the new light fixtures and countertops and things of that nature. We still have a few units left which are old style, as I call it. So as these tenants leave or they want to move to a nicer apartment, then we get the opportunity to go in and do a full upgrade on them. Otherwise, a unit turn is basically the paint and flooring, basic normal wear and tear of a tenant leaving after a year.
So even in COVID, you would still, if it did become vacant, you would do a full renovation and try and get the rent hike?
Because today's financials of our property is stable enough, so we did what we call a stress test. What if my occupancy, my economic vacancy dropped down to say 60% or 70% or 50%? How long can my property sustain itself before I have to either make a capital call or go for forbearance? And both our properties stress tested very well. And it depends on the market and your clientele for each property, and both are different. But one of them is in a small town. And so there is still plenty of movement, especially with schools going remote. So this is not your typical fall semester. But at the same time, by November, people definitely settle down. People don't want to move over Thanksgiving and Christmas. So it'll be the next opportunity will be again January or February. So if a unit gets vacant and it's a classic unit that's never had any upgrades, we will do a full upgrade on it just because we have the opportunity before it gets leased again. So it's a trade-off on how much cash flow you still have and how much of a stress test you do on your property to see how long you can last. So I think our property can last now through March, at least one of them for sure, with a lower occupancy and lower collections. So we're in a very good position in that sense.
Did you have to implement any systems or KPIs to really get a good handle on your unit turns, or did the property management company have all of those systems in place?
So the PM company has all the possible data we could ever want, right? One of them runs with CoreLogic software and the other one with, what's the other popular company for software?
Yardi?
Yeah.
Yardi, yeah, or RealPage.
RealPage. So one has RealPage, one has CoreLogic. So they have all the possible data. It's just I email them and usually get the data that I want from a report, usually within a day. So whatever report I want. Like if I want number of days I haven't collected rent from year to date in 2020, they can tell me, oh, that's you lost 75 days of rent or whatever that number is because of, lost to lease and this and that. Because of not leasing quickly enough, etc. So whatever data I want, I usually ask the property management company. But on a weekly basis, we get certain reports. So one of them is, okay, the units that are leased, the units that are vacated or renewals that are not being renewed, leases not being renewed, but do we have that pre-leased or not? How long has a unit been vacant? What is our plan to lease, etc. So that kind of data. Of course, the financials, obviously the financials, expenses, collections, bad debt, who are our tenants we want to evict, things like that. So we at one point had 4 tenants we wanted to evict, and 2 of them have left. So we only have 2 who are still due, but they came forward with being willing to do payment plans. And that was really nice. But that's an example of things we track. We have a weekly meeting with them, with the property management for all the properties. So during the weekly calls, we always have a standard set of charts we go through. But when I need additional information, I go in and ask them. I also have the ability to log into their system, but I don't do it as often because I pretty much get all the reports I need most of the time.
So are you working with a very large property management company? Yeah, because
Yeah. Well,
RealPage is really expensive.
yeah. We work with companies like, Wayner, Citygate, Sunridge. These are some of the popular property management companies. There's tons and tons of PM companies in the Dallas area, and both my properties are here. So um, we get very good reports.
Right. And you had previously told me about some of these,
Mhm.
strategies you're implementing.
Yeah.
And what I've run into, we have a 34 unit,
Right.
is our PM company is smaller. And I'm like, yeah, they don't have like the capabilities to do this, that the same capabilities that your company has. So it's really been eye-opening as far as people say, bigger is better.
Mhm.
And I was thinking more on like the payroll side of things, not as far as like what systems, software, and data they have available to them as well.
The data is big, and usually the commission you pay them is where it makes the difference. But like the typical salary for a leasing manager or maintenance person is pretty much same across the board, I think. So your difference is in, do you give them 4%, 5%, 3%, whatever it is. Of course, it depends on your collections every month, but that's what is one of the things you can negotiate. And as you have more and more properties managed by the same company, you get a little more leverage.
So are you offering them like certain bonuses and incentives on top of your agreement, or was that already put into your property management agreement with the company?
We come up with new incentives just for the leasing manager and maintenance person on our site. So it's not part of the flat percentage that the PM company always gets. This is not part of that. This is just a special incentive, like you get $50, or you get $100 per lease that is signed at this rate or something like that. So those are all one-time incentives, right? So they may go away. Once we've achieved that goal, that incentive no longer exists, kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we are running close up on time. This is flown by. So thank you, Sandhya.
Sure.
I wanted to get to our section of the show that we call the Fast Five, and those are the same 5 questions we ask everyone. So if you're ready, we can get right into that.
Sure.
All right. Question number 1 is, if you had to start all over again and you were in your early 20s, how would you do that?
I would find someone who is established in my target market and find a way to make them my best friend, do whatever they need so that I can hang on to their coattails and grow, much like you would in the corporate world, right? You find the right person who you look up to, who you think is really smart, and you do everything you can to impress them so that they will take you on, so you can go higher faster.
Fritz, you're really good at making friends.
I don't know what it is. Question number 2, how do you see young professionals adding the most value to experienced operators?
To do a lot of the legwork so that you can save them some time, save the operator time. So, for example, the underwriting, like I mentioned, or being the one to go do all the comps physically, right? That's a lot of work to check the comps, to go and be willing to make the investor follow-up calls or emails, or help them automate their process a little more, or suggesting ways for them to make their social media presence even better, because you might be better at promoting and marketing through Instagram and Facebook versus they might only know LinkedIn and be very professional and very business-like in it, right? So you can come in and add flair to that while still keeping it professional. So,
social media.
Just say some of them might only know the newspaper.
Social media is definitely a common one we hear a lot.
Yeah.
So question number 3 is, what's the biggest mistake you've made in your career, and how have you since adjusted your business because of that?
So I'll talk about my multifamily business, obviously. I think vetting a sponsor enough is something that I've gotten much better at now when I invest passively in a deal, or when I want to join a sponsor actively as well. You should do the same kind of vetting, which is look at their track record. And if you sign up to do a deep value add deal with them passively, for example, or even actively, what prior experience do they have doing that type of deal? That's very important, because they may have done great on a yield play or in a different market, but if they don't have experience in that market, they didn't hire a PM company with experience in that market, or they've never done that type of deal, it's a bad idea to be their scapegoat.
Like that. Definitely.
Definitely some red flags right there.
Yep.
Question number 4, what's been your favorite way to incorporate technology and social media into your business?
Facebook groups, right? I always thought of Facebook as the place where I post my kids' pictures so my family can see it. And now Facebook is all about business. They have business pages, there's Facebook groups. It's exploded and it's helped me connect with dozens, if not hundreds of thousands of people who I otherwise never would have met. So we're Facebook friends is what I tell people. There's so many people I've never met, but we're Facebook friends. So it's kind of crazy how that's helped me network and know things about other products, services, markets, mentoring programs, and attend events and meet people.
Beautiful. And the last question is, what book has been most influential to you along your journey?
Definitely starting out with Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and knowing that your primary residence is not an asset, but rather a liability is a big one. And then following that, just to learn more about syndications, I like Joe Fairless' Best Ever Syndication book. And from the passive side, I love James Kandasamy Passive Investor Handbook. So those would be my top 3 books that I would suggest for anyone.
We appreciate 3 because 3 is better than 1. Well, Sandhya, thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of the Millennials and Multifamily podcast. What would be the best way for any of our listeners to reach out or connect with you?
Just visit my website, multifamily4u.com, where the 4 is a number 4 and the U is spelled out Y-O-U. So multifamily4you.com. You can put in your name and email address to hear from me, or further down, if you scroll down, you can actually say, this is what I want to discuss with you, etc. Let's schedule a call.
Well, all righty. Thank you so much. And this was an absolutely amazing episode.
That's wonderful. Thank you for having me. It's such an honor to be here, and I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for listening to the Millennials in Multifamily podcast, brought to you by Kronos Investment Partners. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a rating and a written review at iTunes so that we can connect with more people. Finally, head on over to kronosinvestmentpartners.com and sign up for our newsletter so you can stay updated on everything we're doing. If you're interested in partnering with us as we find new opportunities, you can also schedule a phone call with us under the Contact Us tab at kronosinvestmentpartners.com.